So my favorite part of any morning bow hunt is getting in early enough so that I have like 10, 15 minutes to sit on my tree stand in the dark and listen and watch the woods just come alive, right? And so years ago, I was sitting in my climbing stand 20 feet up in a tree, and I was hunting off this clearing that I had found scouting the summer before. And I remember when I saw the clearing scouting in August, I was like, I'm going to murder something here. I was excited, right? Because there were all these trails running through it, and it was like hidden in this thicket. It was near, a couple fields, some bedding, and so I was super fired up. So I'm sitting there in the dark thinking like, man, it's early November. It was super cold that morning. The wind was perfect out of the northwest. And I'm like sitting there in anticipation going like, there's no telling what I'm going to see in this clearing today. And I'm fired up. And so I'm sitting there in the dark, waiting on the sun to come up, waiting on the woods to come alive. And something else came alive that morning in me. Irritable bowel syndrome, okay? I did not know then that I have IBS. I know now that I have IBS. And for those of you that don't speak IBS, let me explain. Sometimes I eat cereal and drink coffee, and I just eat cereal and drink coffee. And then other times I eat cereal and drink coffee and then do ungodly things in the bathroom for a couple hours, okay? And so I'm sitting in the tree, and I don't remember what cereal I'd eaten, what coffee I drank, cream, anything. I'm just sitting there. As I'm sitting there in the dark, waiting on the woods to come alive, the kraken began brewing, okay? It was like the dueling humpback whales singing the song of their people. And like riding the whales were angry circus clowns wielding knives, fighting in my stomach. And like it was just like pulsing. And I was sitting there in the dark trying to fight this off. And one voice in my head was like, sir, you have 10 minutes to get out of this tree and declothe before the kraken arrives. 10 minutes to get out of this tree and declothe before the kraken arrives. Over. And the other voice in my head was like, bro, you got this, okay? Stick it out, wait it out, ride this out. You've been waiting to hunt this spot for months. You've saved this spot. It's the rut. And for all you know, Ablar deer spaniel, the rut is like prom night for deer. Ask your moms about it, okay? But like, I'm so fired up. And this voice is telling me like, man, you got to hold on, bro. It's going to go away. Ride this out. And so I kept sitting in my tree stand. And a few minutes passed. And then it starts coming back again harder. And it's like that sweat that starts to form on your forehead, okay? And you start like fidgeting. And I know a lot of you out there right now are like, I don't poop ever. Like we've all been in this zone, okay? So don't judge me, all right? So I'm sitting there and the sweat is forming on my brow and I'm starting to fidget just so that I don't spring a leak. And the voice over here is like, sir, you have 2.7 minutes to get out of this tree and declothe yourself. The kraken is on the way. And this other voice in my head is like, bro, you got this. You are struck down but not destroyed. You can overcome this. You've got to ride this out. You have the sphincter control of a champion. Like you can hold it in, right? You don't ruin this hunt because you know if you climb down this tree and do what you need to do at the base of this tree, no deer will ever come near this for 7 years, okay? So I kept sitting in my tree, hoping that it would go away, waiting a few more minutes. The sweat is forming. And then I hit that point, okay? We've all been here. It's called the point of no return, all right? And the kraken is at the door, banging on the door, and this voice over here is like, declothe now, sir, declothe now. All your clothes off right now. And this voice over here, the one that I'd been listening to, just shrugs and is like, my bad, bro, sorry. And so I'm 20 feet in a tree in a little bitty aluminum climbing stand, and I start hustling. I had the duck bib coveralls on with the shoulder straps and the zips, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I had so many layers on because it was so cold, and I'm gonna do my belt and get it down. And every once in a while, you have to like lock it up, so you don't spring a leak on accident because you're moving too much. We've all been there, don't judge me. Okay. And I had all these layers, and I finally get it down, and it was coming, okay? The kraken was arriving, and all I could do was grab a hold of the sides of my Summit Viper, facing the tree, and the little rail that you sit on to climb, just hang her out, okay? And I'm not gonna describe for you what I pray no human or animal saw, but if you've seen Dumb and Dumber, that scene where Lloyd spikes Harry's tea and he just rides it out, just, right? That was me, okay? And I get done and I'm like, whoo, and I get the wet wipes out of my backpack that I carry in case I take a deer for moments like this, and I'm praising Jesus for the wet wipes and doing what us humans do. And then I start thinking, I got to find a new hunting spot, okay? There's no deer that's going to come near this. This place needs to be killed with fire. And so I start putting my clothes back on, and I'm thinking about where I'm going to go hunt. And I get my pants up, and I button, and I go to get my coveralls, and it was like a murder movie. They were covered in poo in my haste to release the Kraken, I did not get my coveralls out of the way, and I couldn't hunt without them because I'd freeze to death, right? And they were covered with the Kraken, okay? And so I had to kind of unzip the sides and squeeze out. May have had to wipe my hands with a wet wipe. And I get them and I just drop them 20 feet on the ground, right? And climb down in shame. I'm cold. And I get down there. I pack up my stuff. I didn't want to leave them. They're a good set of coveralls. So I took my bow hoist rope and tied them to the coveralls and hauled them out of the woods like a disgusting puppy. And I took them home and hosed them off and washed them and still use them to this day. And the point is, when you listen to the wrong voice, it can get messy, okay? But hear me, students. Look at me in my face, okay? You guys are bombarded with voices every day. You guys live in a world where you carry around something in your pocket called a smartphone that is a neutral thing. It can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, but you carry around in your pocket this megaphone for many of these voices every day. You are bombarded with messages and instruction from these voices every day. These voices tell you who you need to be. They tell you how you need to live. They tell you what you need to think, what you need to not think. They tell you how to feel, what's right, what's true, what's good, what's wrong, what's not true, what's false. They tell you what's important, what's not important. They tell you who's important and who's not important. And some of these voices come to you and they scream falsehood in your ear. And sometimes these voices come and they whisper falsehood and they sound so true, but they're wrong and they're lies. And some of these voices come to you from the humans around you. Some of these voices come to you through digital means. But the bottom line is this: in all of that noise, there's one voice here, and it's the shepherd's. And his voice is truth, and his voice is life. And you can trust him. He truly cares for you. He loves you. He died for you. You can trust him. You can trust his voice, right? But over here, these voices that you've been listening to, that they've led you out in the darkness, away from the pen, they've led you astray. They tell you that there's fulfillment and purpose in life around every tree and every corner in the wilderness. And they've left you broken and hurting and feeling like you're good enough, right? And so between these two voices, these voices of the world, right? These voices of the world that if they don't line up with the shepherd, man, they're under the control of the enemy, the evil run. Between these voices and between the shepherd's voice, hanging in the balance is your heart and your soul and your mind, your eternity, right? And the question tonight, like I said to Nate, is what voices are you listening to? What voice are you listening to tonight? This passage we read earlier, the Good Shepherd passage in John 10, it's one of those deceiving ones if you've grown up in the church. I did not grow up in the church, so if you didn't, hop on the struggle bus with this guy, okay? But if you grew up in the church, all right, John chapter 10 is one of those that they love to tell in children's church and in nursery, and they love to take little posters of little sheep with their floppy cute ears and bless their hearts and put them on the wall. And if you've ever seen a children's Bible, it'll have pictures in this passage of cute little sheep. And here's the problem. This passage, John 10, that Nate read for us earlier, it's not about the sheep. Say it's not about the sheep. Yes, you already know more than most followers of believers. It's not about the sheep, right? This passage is actually a verbal slap in the face to some adversaries of Jesus. Because this passage is about the shepherd, not the sheep. And let me give you the backstory, okay? So in John chapter 10, this may surprise you, but right before that comes John chapter 9, okay? And it's one continuous story. These chapter differentiations didn't come until hundreds of years after God inspired the writing of Scripture, right? But in John chapter 9, the beginning of this story, here's what happened. There was this little blind boy, we'll call him Stevie Wonder, and this little blind boy, Stevie, in his town, Jesus heals this kid. And here's the thing, he had been blind since birth. Everybody knew blind Stevie. Like he sat on the corner and he begged for alms and money and food and all of this stuff. Like they knew him. And next thing you know, Jesus heals him and they're seeing little Stevie do watercolor paints and play soccer and frolic like you can see. And the whole town's like, what the heck is going on? What happened to Stevie? And word is starting to spread. People are hearing about this Jesus guy. Man, I saw it. He spit in the mud and put it on little Stevie's eyes and little Stevie can see, right? Now, here's the problem. All of these people in the town used to listen to these other voices of the world called the Pharisees. We'll talk about them in a second. And now all of these people are hearing about this Jesus guy. and they're wanting to go over here and learn about him and follow him, right? They want to hear what he has to say. Like, if he can hear Stevie, surely he knows some truth for us, right? And so they're leaving these voices of the world and coming over here and following Jesus. And how do you think these voices of the world, these Pharisees, these religious elite feel about that? These jackwagons are hacked, okay? And here's why. And you got to hear this because this is the most important thing I'm going to say at the beginning of this. These Pharisees, they are like rock stars, okay? To us, I know when you think of ministry people that you think rock star, okay? And just calm down for a little bit because that was a joke, okay? You can laugh. We're a bunch of overweight nerds, all right? But in this day and age, truly the religious elite, man, they were like rock stars, okay? Like their world was so intertwined. These guys had power and money. They had authority. They had control. They get invited to all the parties with 2 R's. Like these dudes are the dudes, right? Everybody follows them. And they see all of these sheep, all of these people leaving them, and they see their way of life crumbling, and they don't like it. And so they get mad at Jesus. And what do? They trump up some charges in John 9. Because here's the problem. The day that Jesus healed little Stevie Wonder was the Sabbath. And the Sabbath was a day of rest. You weren't allowed to do work. It was sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. And they're calling what Jesus did in little Stevie's life work. And so they're arguing with Jesus, like, how dare you give him his eyesight on the Sabbath? You're a sinner. And they're trying to get these people to come back and follow them and not follow Jesus, right? And this passage is literally Jesus responding to them. This is not a cute little story about sheep. This is a punch in the face from the good shepherd who's putting these guys in their place. And here's what he's going to say to them. Hey, you guys over here, you voices of the world, you Pharisees, the reason the sheep are leaving you, the people are leaving you, because they know you don't care about them. And they hear my voice, and they know that I do, and that I love them. And they're following me because they know that in me they can find life, life within life. That I'm a good shepherd, that I'm going to protect them and care for them, that I love them, that I'm going to die for them, right? And he's going to take it up a few notches, and I don't want to spoil it, but let's dive in. Let's read the story of the good shepherd. We're going to read a little chicken nugget, talk a little chicken nugget. Okay, here we go. Chapter 10, verse 1. Jesus says, very truly, I tell you Pharisees, he's talking to these guys, that anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. He's going to use these terms, thief, robber, stranger, hired hand. Every time you hear that, he's talking about the religious elite of the day, the voices of the day, right? And so he says, the person who doesn't enter the pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. But the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them. And his sheep follow him because they know his voice. That's so huge. Say, know his voice. Yay, we're like a cult. Okay. Because they know his voice, but they will never follow a stranger. These guys. They will never follow a stranger. In fact, they'll run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Okay, there's a lot going on here, okay? This is a doozy chunk to start with. And if we're really going to understand it, we got to put our boots on, okay? We got to put our cowboy boots and our cowgirl boots on. We got to get a little dirt on my boots. I'm taking you uptown. Like 2 of you know that song. Anyway, we got to talk about farming, okay? And here's the thing. You've got to understand that shepherding and being a farmer and having these sheep and caring for them in this day and age was literally not, I mean, it was close, but it was so different from what we do nowadays. Like, I have cows, okay? We're going to talk about them here in a little bit. I have cows. I run cows on my land. I got a lease next to me. But here's what I have at my advantage, okay? I live in my home, and I have a fence and a cattle guard to keep them out of the yard most of the time. And then I have a fence and a cattle guard to keep them on my property most of the time. Now, I have fences, but in this day and age, they didn't have fences. They ran their sheep fenceless, right? And so the shepherd couldn't just be like, hey guys, go do sheepy things. Don't die. Good luck. You know, like he couldn't do that. Like they'd go out and get carried off by thieves and robbers and eaten by wolves. And so literally the shepherd, if he sent his sheep to the field, he would have to go with them. He'd have to do life with them. Like if he takes them to water, he goes with them and leads them to water. If they need food, he goes and he leads them to food, right? He literally did life with them, sat on the hillside while they ate and drank and grazed around, fought off coyotes and wolves to keep them safe. Typically, the shepherd's relationship was so close with his sheep, a lot like it is with my cows, but more so, that he knew them by name. Like he could literally name all of his sheep. He knew them by name. And at night, it was the most dangerous time of the day for sheep. They could get eaten by wolves or coyotes. They could get carried off at night. Typically, bad things happen at night. That's good advice for you, just as a high school student, okay? Stick that in your pocket. But bad things can happen at night. And so at night, the shepherd would lead his sheep to a pen. Okay, I got some pictures here I stole straight from the interwebs, okay? This first one is what I call the great value pen, okay? It does the job, but the package is not as pretty, okay? But it's a great value pen. They would literally take sticks and anything they could find out in the wilderness to create some sort of like pen, okay? But if they were close to a city or close to their home, a lot of times they'd have this next one. It was like a more permanent pen, right? They'd put sometimes thorns around the wall above this pen to keep things from climbing over and trying to steal the sheep. And so the shepherd at night, he would lead his sheep into one of these pens. Because in the pen was safety, in the pen was security, in the pen was not wolves, okay, and that's key. And so he led them. But here's the problem. You may have noticed the issue with both of those. There's no gate. There's no gate. They didn't have the ability in that day and age to drill and drive anchors into stone, okay? They didn't have our metalworking capability. And so typically these pens out in the wilderness and near towns didn't have a gate. So what would the shepherd do? He would lead his sheep in, and then he would literally sleep in the gap. He would lay in the gap so that the sheep would not wander out in the middle of the night. He would lay in the gap so thieves and robbers wouldn't just walk in and lead the sheep out. He would lay in the gap so that wolves and coyotes wouldn't come and eat. I mean, talk about some easy targets. You got a bunch of dumb sheep stuck in an octagon, okay? He slept in the gap. He literally made himself the gate to protect them from themselves and protect them from things that are outside. And then in the morning, this beautiful thing would happen, okay? A lot of times, more than one shepherd would store their sheep in these pens at night. They would intermingle their herd, right? Their herd, flock, flockson. What is sheep? We'll call it a flock. All right. They would put multiple shepherds would put their flocks in the pen, right? And they would sleep at the gate or sleep around the perimeter, right? And in the morning, when they needed to separate their sheep, the shepherds would spread out and they would call the sheep. I don't know what a sheep call is. Like, sheepy, sheep, sheep, sheep. I don't know. But they would call. Sometimes it would be, yes. Sometimes, that's a goat. Sometimes it would be a whistle. Sometimes it would be with their voice. But they would call to their sheep. And here's the thing. They had done life with their sheep so much, lived with them in the wilderness, led them to water and food, that these sheep knew their shepherd's voice. They knew his voice. So when he called, the shepherds would spread out, and the sheep would literally come out of the pen and organize themselves with their shepherd. And then they would lead them out to food and water for the day. Right? And so what is Jesus saying here, okay? If you take all of that little Bible knowledge and put it in your nerdy little pocket, what is he saying? Here's what he's saying. You ready? He's saying all of these sheep have heard the shepherd's voice, and they've been listening to these voices of the world that do not care about them. They're thieves. They've broken into the pen at night over the wall and stolen the sheep. They're robbers. They've used force to take the sheep out of the Father's pen. They're leading these sheep astray, and they don't care about the sheep, and the sheep know this, right? And so when the sheep hear the true shepherd's voice, they're leaving. Because when they hear this guy's voice, they know, this is the guy that's fed me. This is the guy that's watered me. This is the guy that's had my back. This is the guy that's fought off wolves and coyotes and all of those things. This is the dude. And in his voice that I hear as he calls me away from these wrong voices of the world that are leading me astray, in his voice, I know that there's safety and security and life within life and salvation. And so all of these sheep are leaving those Pharisees, those religious leaders, those voices of the world and going to Jesus. And that's why. And the best illustration I can give you to drive this point home is this. I can get some help from my friends here, okay? That guy's so cute. Oh, my goodness. You can say, "Aw, those are my babies, man." What you can't see in the video is when I do that call, and it goes like this. I'm not going to do it. You heard it. But what you can't see in the video is when I do that call, they're running. They've been eating, up in a different field, feeding up behind the house. They're literally sprinting. All 1,200 pounds, 2,000-pound bull literally running to me, right? And why is that? It is because I have a bag of treats known as cattle cubes, right? It is. But, man, it's because they know me. They know my voice. They know that, I've helped deliver their calves. They know that I give them vaccinations and medicine, and I tend their wounds. They know that I give them water and I give them hay in the winter. Like, they know me. They know my voice. I've done life with them. And here's what you don't even know is that many of these cows have genetics in them that were cared for by my grandpa before he died in 2006. Almost every cow in this herd right here have genetics in them that were cared for by my dad before he died 2 years ago. And I bought all of my dad's herd from my mom and added it to my little group, right? There are 3 generations of Tibet men who have cared for these cows. That call is a call I inherited from my father that he inherited from his grandpa. Woo, cow! And when I do it, they come running because they know that voice means food and water and safety and security, and that I'm their person, right? Now, here's what's funny. Any one of you in here could take my call, and I could play a video for you, and you could memorize it. You could take a bag of cubes, and you could go stand in one of my pastures. This is right in front of my house. And you could stand out there, and you could do the call. Woo, cow! You could shake the bag, and here's what's going to happen, because it's happened every time to my wife. It's happened every time to my cowboy Robert, who feeds and helps me load. Ready? You do the call, you shake the bag, and they come running. And they're kind of like hesitant. They're like, that kind of sounded like our dude, but I don't know if this is how cows run, but this is what I imagine, okay? That kind of sounded like our dude. And they stop like 100 yards short. And they're like, full stop. And I know what they're thinking. That guy's a lot skinnier than our guy. And literally the last time Robert tried to help me rope and load some cows, he shook the bag. He told me he shook the bag. He called, and they ran, and they stopped at 100 yards for like 3 seconds, and then they all just turned and ran into the woods. And the one little Charolais bull calf that he was trying to load so that we could sell at the sell barn, Robert hops on his horse and starts chasing him, and it ran straight through a 5-wire barbed wire fence like it was butter. And we didn't see it for 2 days. Why is that? Because they don't know him. He's not their shepherd. He's not their person. They don't trust him. They know that he doesn't care for them like I care for them. Like the leader of our herd, the matriarch of our herd, this is Boo. She's got white on her face right here. She's got horns and creepy eyes, and she looks really scary, but she's really not. Her mom died giving birth to her years ago, and my mom and dad bottle fed her and saved her life. And so she knows that when she hears a Tibet male's voice do that call, that person cares for her, cares for her. And she leads that herd everywhere. I'm telling you tonight, guys, what Jesus is saying in this passage is this. And I'm going to unpack it for you because we're not here to learn a little story to put on our belts and be like, I feel so spiritual, right? It's about application. It's about what are we going to do differently? Like, you need to hear me in this, right? What Jesus is saying in this first chunk is these voices in the world, they don't care about you. All of those voices I talked about, the influences you follow on social media, the people around you whose voices don't resonate with the shepherds, the people who tell you that if you want to figure out who you are and your identity, you got to do this or be that, the people that tell you that if you want to belong somewhere, you want to have a group of people that you fit in with, that you've got to change who you are, do this or be that, or whatever it may be, the people that tell you that your purpose in this world is just entertainment and academic and athletic glory or whatever, fill in the blank. These voices of the world that are telling you, promising you everything if you will simply do what they say, they don't care about you. They will say that they do, so you'll buy their products and follow them. They'll even believe that they do, but they don't care about you. But Jesus is like this. He's like the true shepherd. And those people that day left and followed him. We need to leave and follow him because he truly cares for us, right? He wants what's best for us. He wants to give us spiritual food and spiritual water. He wants to give us security and safety and stability in this hostile world, right? He wants to give us life within life, right? And here's the thing. He takes it a step further. Because on that day, it would have been a slap in the face to the Pharisees to say what he said, but he takes it a step further, right? That, hey, not only are they following because I'm the true shepherd, right? But you've been telling them, these voices have been telling that if they wanted to honor God and have a right standing with him, they had to listen to these guys, right? Do what they did, follow their rules. And Jesus is saying, but if they want to have a right stand with God, they got to come through me. Listen to this, verse 7. Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me over here, they're thieves and they're robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief over here, he comes only to steal and kill and destroy. These voices over here from the world that don't care about you, they're just like their father, the devil, Bobby. They want your death and destruction. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. He takes it a notch up and he basically says, not only if these sheep want to honor my Father and have a right standing with him, do they need to listen to me and follow me, but I am the way to the Father. I am the gate. He's referring back to the pen. He says, I'm the one that sleeps at the gap. If they want to come into the Father's pen, they've got to come through me. I am the gate, right? I am the way to spiritual nourishment and spiritual water. I am the way to life within life. That phrase, life within life, means life and then life that exceeds the need, right? And Jesus is saying, I'm the gate. I am the way to that. I am the way to the Father, right? And the best way I can illustrate this for you is we had this bottle calf, right? His name was Albus. This is Albus, me holding Albus in our living room. I know, I love him. He's a turd. February 14th, Valentine's Day, Albus's mom is a first-time calver. It was the worst ice storm, snowstorm I've seen, if you live in this area, that I've seen since I was in high school. We were busting ice on the pond 3 times a day just so they would have water. I had to put old hay on the ground just so they had something between them and the ice and the snow, man. I was feeding them hay and feeding them feed in cubes every morning, every night, checking on them multiple times a day, like praying that the calves would make it, that the cows would make it, right? And on February 14th, on Valentine's Day, it was a Sunday, we canceled church and did digital church. And my daughter and I went to check, and Albus's mom had just given birth to him in a blackberry bush covered with ice. And if a calf is born and it doesn't get its body heat up within 2 hours, they die. And so she needs to clean them off, and she's standing 30 yards away with her back to him. And so my daughter and I leave him for a little bit, and we go bust ice on the pond, and we come back, and she's not even there. And he's just standing there covered in fluid, just shivering. So we threw him in the front of the truck and texted my wife, said we need lots of blankets. And we came home and we dried him off. We put him in front of the wood stove, right? And he lived in the house for like 3 days. He peed a pile of pee. I have never seen anything that big in our kitchen floor. I was like, this is like the fountain of youth. It just keeps going and going, right? But like literally, man, we saved this guy's life. And we were going to keep him in the barn because we wanted to vaccinate him and keep him away from the cows. He doesn't have a mom to look out for him and keep him safe, right? And so we're going to keep him in the barn, but we didn't want him to be alone. So we got him a friend. We named him Sparky, right? And Sparky, that's Sparky on the right, that's Albus on the left. We got Sparky from a dairy farm. And so we bottle fed him too, right? And so they lived in the barn for like 2 months. And once I was able to vaccinate them and ensure that they weren't going to bring anything from the dairy farm or whatever into our herd, every morning we'd take them from the barn down to the yard, and we'd go through this red gate, this red pipe gate that goes down into our field right in front of the house, and we let them go out. It's so funny. Every morning they go out, and they'd be like, meh. And then the cows down in the woods would be like, oh, it's those idiots again. Moo! And then they'd go running down and find them. Again, the cows run like this. And they'd go find them, and they would hang out with our herd all day long. But guess what? At night, we'd put them back in the barn. And in the morning, we'd feed them bottles. We'd send them out. And at night, they'd come back. We'd give them grain. We'd put them up in the barn. And lo and behold, after like a week of this, guess where they were every night at dark? Standing at the gate. They're right next to the gate in this picture. Do you know why? Because they know that gate, through this gate, is safety. They don't have moms out there to protect them from coyotes, and we got a lot of coyotes near my place. They don't have moms to look out for them and tell them where to go in the woods, where safety is, where security is. If coyotes were to run, all the moms would take care of their babies and not these guys. And so they knew that security and safety was through this gate in our yard. And so every night we'd get done with dinner and be like, okay, let's go feed the boys and put them up. And we go out and they're just standing at the gate. Moo. Because they know through the gate is safety, security. Through the gate is life. That's what Jesus is saying, right, with this chunk. He's saying these sheep have come over. They've left these voices of the world. Don't flipping care about them and been leading them astray and taking advantage of them for their own benefit, their own money, their own power, their own whatever. And they're following me. And he takes it up a notch and says, but not only that, if they truly want to honor the Father, if they truly want to have life, if they truly want to have salvation, they've got to come through me. I am the gate. And this is one of those like big claim, put up or shut up moments. This is a like I can dunk a basketball moment. Okay, if I were up here and I said to you, I can dunk a basketball. Everyone in here should be looking at me thinking like, how he gonna get all that corn dog up there to that rim on them skinny little sticks he calls legs, okay? You'd be like, prove it. You make this claim like you could dunk a basketball and you're a chubby white guy, prove it, okay? And this is one of those moments where Jesus is saying, man, dude, I am the way to the Father. I am the gate. I am the way to salvation and security. And the people that are listening today, especially religious leaders, these false voices of the world, are probably thinking, okay, prove it, dude. What are you going to do to prove that statement? They're hacked off. What does he say? Verse 11. I am the good shepherd. Full stop. We could spend weeks just talking about those words right there. He uses the title Good Shepherd, which was only used in the Old Testament to refer to the Father, especially in the Psalms. He uses the phrase, I am. It's actually, in the Greek, it's ego eimi. It's I am. He's literally using the I am name of God from the burning bush story with Moses in Exodus. So he's saying, you want to know how I'm the way to the Father? I am the Father. I am the Father. I am the good shepherd. Keeps going. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Oh, I skipped that part. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand over here, he's not the shepherd. He does not own the sheep. And when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. And then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. And this man over here, he runs away because he's a hired hand and he does not care for the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay my life down for the sheep. His put up or shut up claim is, here's how you know that I am the gate to the Father. Here's how you know that I am the gate to security and safety and salvation and all of that. I am the Father. We're the same. And when the wolf of this world comes to demand that the sheep die for the sin that they've committed against the Father, against me, when the wolf of this world comes to demand that they die, these guys over here, these voices of the world have been telling them, follow me, I have fulfillment, I have life, I have salvation, I have a way to the Father. They're going to run because they don't care about the sheep, they're hired hands. But when the wolf comes to me and he demands that the sheep die for their sin, I throw myself to the wolf and I die for them so they don't have to. I am the good shepherd. And so Jesus tonight, again, we're not learning this to put a little notch on our little spiritual Susie belts. He's saying in the story to these people that were there that day, those Pharisees, those voices of the world, they don't care about you, but I do. You can trust me. In me is life. You know my voice. In me is life. And to prove it, I'm going to die for you. He's literally preaching the pre-cross gospel to these dudes that day. So what do? Here's the problem, okay? The problem is that in this room, and I'm a youth minister, and so I know this because I've been spying on you. Just kidding, I'm a youth minister. I know that in this room, there are so many of you, and I'm talking to believers and non-believers. I know that in this room right now, there are so many students who have listened to the wrong voice. Whether you believed in Jesus or not, whether you've known the safety and security of his pen or not, there are so many of you that have been led astray by the voices of this world, these thieves, these robbers, these strangers. They led you off out of the pen, and you're out in the darkness and in the wilderness, and they're literally picking you apart, right? They've told you that hey, around this next tree, you're going to find fulfillment. Hey, around this next corner, you're going to figure out who you are. Hey, around this next corner, you're going to find your place to belong in this world and what your purpose is. They've told you that you've got to look like this, ladies, in order to be accepted and loved by the dudes. They've told you got to look like this, guys, in order to be accepted and loved by the ladies. They've told you that you got to wear this to belong and fit in. They told you got to have this watch and this phone in your pocket if you're going to fit in and find your place to belong. They told you got to roll with these people and date this guy and date this girl in order for you to find fulfillment and wholeness in this world. They've told you that you've got to drink a lot of this and you got to smoke a little bit of that. You got to abuse a little bit of this substance, right, in order to fit in with these people around you, right? They've told you you've got to watch this show. You got to follow this channel. You got to know all these things, right? You got to have this many followers on your social media to be of any value to this world, right? And they've promised you everything around every corner and around every tree, and you've swallowed their lies wholesale. And the second you get around that tree, all you find is another promise, and you're left wanting. Because here's the thing. You have a shepherd-shaped hole in your sheepy little heart. And you will never find any fulfillment for that hole in anything that these voices from the world have to offer. You will be left wanting and broken every time. And I know so many of you, whether you've been in the pen or not, whether you're believers or not, you've gone out into the darkness with these voices of the world and you're hurting and you're broken, right? You're in pieces. You've gone out into the world and you literally are out there feeling like, I don't fit. Nobody wants me. I'm of no value. I'm never going to be like him or like her. I'm never going to fit with these people. I don't even know why I'm here. And you're out there in the darkness and you're broken and you're hurting and you're in pieces. And I want to talk to you tonight. If you're in this room and you're a believer in Jesus, look at me and my ugly bald face, okay? The call tonight is to stop listening to those voices that don't resonate with the shepherds. They're under the control of the wolf, the enemy, the evil one, right? And they're promising you things that they can't deliver. And he's calling you to leave the wilderness and leave the darkness if you're a believer and if you've been out there caught up in sin and whatever it may be, and to come home to the pen. And Scripture says the story of the prodigal son, I love this, that he stands at the pen and he's looking for you. He's desperate. He's calling your name, and you know his voice, right? You know his voice. And he's calling you, come home, come home. You're not going to find what you're looking for out there. You're only going to find it here. Come home. And I love that in the story of the prodigal son, that as the prodigal son comes home, he doesn't stand at the gate and as the son comes in and be like, well, here's a list of all the things you did wrong. You're a failure, and I'm disappointed. Like, that's not what he did. Scripture says he hiked up his robe, and he ran after his kid. He literally shamed himself. In that day and age, Jewish men did not show their legs, and they did not run, and I kind of like those policies, okay? But he ran after his kid, and he hugs him and embraces him, and he brings him into the pen. And you know what he did? He didn't chastise him. He didn't give him a lecture. He's more concerned about the well-being of his son. And like a good grandma, he's like, you look like you need some food. And so let's sacrifice the best, calf that we have, the fattened calf. We're going to kill it. We're going to feed you up. And he's checking you for wounds and bite marks from the wolves and the thieves and the robbers, right? The calling tonight, if you were a child of God who's chosen to believe in him, you've wandered out into the wilderness and the darkness because you listened to the wrong voices, he's saying to you tonight, come home. It's that easy. Come through Jesus, the gate, the door. And if you walk through him, there's forgiveness. He loves you. You can trust him, right? You know his voice. And if you're in this room and you're a non-believer, I want to talk to you really quick because this is gospel night. And if you're in this room and you've never accepted Christ and you've never chosen to believe in him, all you've ever known are the voices of the world. All you've ever known since day one is not the sheep pen. It's these voices out here telling you that you got to be this and do that and become this person in order to fit and find your identity and belonging and purpose in this world, right? All you've ever known is stumbling around in darkness, right? Pain and brokenness. And they're promising you all of those things around every tree and around every corner, and you're left wanting every time. And I'm telling you right now, the beautiful thing in Luke is Luke tells us that the shepherd leaves the pen. He leaves the 99 and he's out and he's looking for you and he's yelling and he's calling your name. You feel it in your heart right now. The Holy Spirit knocking on the door. It's the good shepherd and he's calling your name. Come home. You don't know how good it can be in the pen, but all you got to do is come and follow me and come through me and you will find life within life and salvation. He's saying to you, come home for the first time. But here's the thing. If I'm in your shoes, how do you know you can trust him? You don't really know his voice. You've never been in the pen. You don't know that life that's on the inside. And so I want to tell you, I've seen this story 100 times before. I want to tell you about a youth group boy that found himself going to CIY with us, right? Years and years ago. We had this youth group kid, and this kid came from, and I don't know if you're in here and you weren't raised in church, this kid grew up in a rough family. Like his immediate family was pretty good. His parents loved him and provided, and they had a little bit of some drug and alcohol issues in his own home, but they controlled it right. But this kid, dude, his extended family was a mess. He had relatives die of drug overdoses, right? He had relatives in prison for murder. He had relatives killed trying to steal stuff so they could buy drugs. This kid's life around him was literally a perfect image of family members listening to the wrong voices and being led down this track that was nothing but death and destruction. They were being devoured by the enemy, right? And he found himself at youth group like a month and a half before CIY. And he gets invited to go, and he decides to go. And this kid, it's crazy. He didn't have a lot of money. His family had a lot of money, so he'd really never been out of the surrounding states that he grew up in. And so he hops on a charter bus. We took like 40-something kids that year, and we went to Colorado. And he goes to CIY, and while he was out in a week just like this, he heard the gospel for the first time. It blows my mind that this student literally grew up in the Bible Belt and had never heard the gospel. He knew that Jesus had died for him. He knew that he was a sinner, but nobody ever explained it like we talked about tonight, right? Like that you've sinned and you deserve to die, and the good shepherd throws himself at the wolf and dies in your place, right? He had never heard that before. And the night that preacher preached, they get done and they start singing the songs. And I remember it was a gym like this, and there were bleachers on the left side, and he sat up at the top next to his cousin Ryan Bovis. And all of the youth group was down here doing what girls do, just bawling, okay? Like, ooh, hugging, snot bubbles, all that stuff. And he and his cousin are sitting up there, and they're just being hard, right? Like, this isn't hitting us, right? Isn't hitting us. The whole time, the Holy Spirit was knocking on the door. He's hearing the shepherd's voice, right? And eventually, like 2 or 3 songs by the leader, his name was Jeff, he walks down the bleachers, and he comes down, and he accepts Christ. And here's what's crazy. This kid, I've never seen, he was in from the beginning. He was at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. He was leading. He was being invited to teach, all of these things. A year later, he goes to CIY, man, and he chooses to do ministry, right? And I've watched this guy's life closely over the last couple years as this guy has just pursued Jesus. And I'm here to tell you right now, the Good Shepherd saved him. If you're a lost one in this room and have never accepted Christ, the Good Shepherd saved him from those rails that his family has set before him that were nothing but drugs and suffering and pain and all of that dysfunction, right? The Good Shepherd said, and here's how I know, because that's me. That's me. I was the unchurched kid who grew up not knowing Jesus, not going to church. And I could tell you so many stories. My uncle, one of them, died of a drug overdose running away from a court-enforced rehab. Another uncle died in a hotel room. He asphyxiated on his own vomit because he was going through a divorce, and he was drunk and he was high. I've got a cousin that killed a man over a $200 stereo 30 minutes down the road. I could take you to the parking lot in Stillwell, Oklahoma, where he killed a man for a $200 stereo. My nephew 3 months ago was breaking into a house to steal stuff so he could buy drugs, and he was shot and killed, and I could take you to the house he was shot and killed in. It's so nostalgic for me to be this close to my hometown and be preaching the gospel to you, but I'm here to tell you, I could tell you all of these stories, right? All of these stories about the dysfunction and the pain in my family, but here's what I'm telling you. The night before that CIY trip, my mom took me to the dollar store and bought me my first Bible, King James, letters in red, and put me on that bus the next day. And I went to CIY and I heard the gospel, and Jesus, the Good Shepherd, he saved me from all of that mess. And so I stand here tonight. If you're a non-believer in this room, I'm telling you, look at me in my face. You can trust him. I promise you, you can trust him. Like the promises that he makes for you, that you can have life within life, it's real. It's better than anything I've ever seen out here. You can trust his voice. He loves you. He died for you. And all he's asking for you tonight as he calls your name and knocks on the door is just to come through him, the door and the gate. Just to walk through him. And you will find peace and security and stability. You will find identity and belonging and purpose that you would never find in the world. You will find salvation tonight. And so that's the question. Believers and non-believers in here. That you've been drug out into the world and ravaged by the enemy. Listen to the wrong voices. Tonight the question is, will you listen to the Good Shepherd?